you stand at the edge of a vast, storm-swept cliff. The wind howls, biting at your skin, the rain lashing like needles against your face. Below, the dark ocean roars, a chaotic mass of foamy waves, its power both terrifying and endless. Yet, you are not afraid. In fact, there's something within you, perhaps it's a deeply rooted sense of destiny, that compels you forward, toward the edge of that precipice. Why? What draws you to this impossible precipice, this daunting abyss that threatens to swallow you whole? Could it be courage, or perhaps a deep, gnawing belief that you are meant to face this? There's a strange comfort in the discomfort, a sense that, in confronting the storm, you are not merely surviving, but transforming. But as you step closer to the cliff's edge, something unexpected happens. Your feet hesitate. Your heart tightens. A thought occurs to you: what if I fall? What if I fail? The abyss below is not just the physical ocean. It is a symbol, an echo of something far larger, a trial, a burden, something you feel deep in your bones you have been chosen for. And yet, you wonder, why me? Why now? What if this test, the storm, the chaos, the abyss, is not a punishment but a divine invitation? The paradox lies in the very core of the question: why would the divine, the higher power, give its chosen ones the most difficult trials? What does it mean to be chosen for hardship? To be called to face the impossible? Is it a curse or a blessing? Are these trials really shaping you into something greater, or are they simply exposing the deep cracks of human suffering? These questions claw at your mind, demanding an answer, yet no answer comes. Every fiber of your being yearns to know why some are given a path of struggle, while others are allowed to drift along, seemingly untouched by the storms of life. What is the meaning behind this choice? In a world that often promises that good things come to those who are deserving, how is it that some, those who seem to be the most faithful, the most sincere, are burdened with a weight no human should bear? Why is it that the very ones who are called the chosen face so many trials, so much pain, while others live with relative ease? The more you ponder, the more the question grows in your mind: why do the chosen ones have to endure so much more than everyone else? Is it truly because they are specially selected, set apart from the masses? Or is there something more to it, a deeper cosmic reasoning that transcends human understanding? Your mind reels. The storm rages around you, but you are no longer just standing at the cliff's edge. In some strange way, the cliff has become a metaphor for your life. The storm is not just external, it is within you. Every doubt, every fear, every question, these are the winds battering against your soul. They demand answers, yet the answers remain elusive. What is the purpose of suffering when it seems so undeserved? What is the meaning of struggle when it appears to be nothing but senseless torment? Why do the chosen have to pay the highest price, and what is the cost of their divine calling? You begin to feel the weight of your existence press down upon you. The question claws deeper into your consciousness, echoing louder with each passing moment: what is the nature of this trial? And why does it feel like a burden meant only for the worthy, the strong, the brave? But even as these questions churn in your mind, you can feel it. There's something at the core of this paradox that hints at a deeper truth. Something is waiting to be understood, a revelation just out of reach. You know it's coming, but you don't know when. Perhaps, in the end, it's not about answers at all. Perhaps it's about the experience, the journey through the storm. Perhaps, just as the chosen are tested, so too must you be tested to find your own answer to the question that's haunted humanity for millennia: why do the chosen ones endure so much suffering? And with that thought lingering like a haunting echo, the storm grows quieter, and you feel an unexpected calm. But the questions remain, unresolved, unanswered. And they will drive you forward, into the heart of the mystery, into the storm itself. The storm in your mind continues to rage, a manifestation of the very question that haunts you. What could possibly explain why those who seem most faithful, most pure, are burdened with trials that others avoid? To seek the answer, we must first dive into the psychological and philosophical roots of this paradox, because the struggle itself is not simply external, nor is it arbitrary. It speaks to something deeper, something integral to the human experience. The essence of this question can be traced back to the very nature of what it means to be human. Every human mind is, in essence, a battleground. There is no clear, universally accepted understanding of why suffering exists, but some of the most profound thinkers throughout history have sought to explore its nature. If we dare to look beyond the superficial answers, we begin to see the true complexity that lies beneath. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, spoke often of the process of individuation, the journey of self-discovery and transformation. Jung believed that the trials of life, especially those that feel unbearable, are often the very crucibles in which our truest selves are forged. He argued that human beings must face their own shadows, the parts of themselves they fear or repress, in order to achieve wholeness. In a sense, the difficult trials bestowed upon the chosen are not simply punishment, they are invitations to confront the parts of the self that we are most reluctant to face. Through the darkness, the human spirit has the potential to rise and grow, gaining strength and wisdom that would never have been attained in the absence of adversity. But what of the pain? What of the suffering that accompanies these trials? Are these not simply senseless cruelties? To answer this, we must turn to the existentialist philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who pushed humanity to embrace the darkness, the suffering, and the struggle. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, the overman or superman, is not one who avoids suffering, but one who rises above it, finding meaning in the chaos. For Nietzsche, suffering is not the absence of meaning, it is the very crucible in which meaning is forged. The strongest individuals are not those who avoid pain, but those who are able to transform it into something greater. In fact, Nietzsche's famous proclamation that "what does not kill me makes me stronger" speaks directly to the core of this question. The chosen ones, those who seem to be given the hardest burdens, are being sculpted through their trials into something more resilient, more transcendent than those who experience no struggle. The paradox lies in the fact that while the trials feel overwhelming, they also hold the potential for the greatest transformation. To grow into one's fullest potential, it seems, is not a smooth or easy journey, it is a perilous climb up a jagged mountain. Yet, in the end, the reward is the ability to stand at the summit, transformed, as someone who has seen the world from a vantage point few others will ever know. But there is something deeper still, something that transcends the individual and touches the collective. The trials of the chosen are not simply personal, they often reflect a larger, more societal dynamic. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, saw human existence as a constant cycle of suffering, driven by what he called the will to live. According to Schopenhauer, life itself is inherently tragic, human beings are driven by endless desires, and the pursuit of those desires always leads to disappointment and suffering. In this sense, the very notion of being chosen for hardship can be seen as an aspect of the human condition. The chosen ones are not exceptions, they are, in fact, the bearers of a universal truth that all humans must confront: life is filled with suffering. In this light, the chosen are the individuals who have been forced to face this reality head-on, not through a cosmic design or fate, but as a result of the very forces that govern human existence. Their suffering is not a random event, nor is it a sign of divine wrath. Instead, it is an essential aspect of the human journey, the process through which all individuals, to varying degrees, must confront the inescapable truth of their own vulnerability. To truly grasp the weight of this truth, one might consider the words of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who argued that meaning in life is not found in the absence of suffering, but in how one chooses to face it. Frankl's experience in concentration camps led him to conclude that, While we cannot always control the circumstances of our lives, we can control how we respond to them. Those who were able to find meaning in their suffering, even in the most brutal of conditions, were the ones who survived and ultimately thrived. Frankl's work points to something profound, that the chosen ones, the ones tasked with enduring the greatest trials, are given a unique opportunity. They are invited to find meaning in their suffering, to transcend it, and through this transcendence, to contribute something invaluable to the world around them. Their trials may seem unbearable, but it is precisely through their perseverance that they offer others a glimmer of hope, a path to meaning, and a demonstration of the incredible strength of the human spirit. But these ideas also raise more questions. What does it mean, then, to choose suffering? And more importantly, who is it that does the choosing? Does the universe select those destined for suffering, or is suffering a consequence of deeper existential forces, the very forces that shape our identity and purpose? These are questions that philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual leaders have grappled with for centuries. But one thing is clear. The trials of the chosen ones are not as straightforward as they seem. They are a reflection of deeper truths about the nature of human existence, suffering, and the potential for transformation. They are a paradox, both a curse and a blessing, and understanding them requires more than surface-level analysis. It requires a journey that confronts not just the trials themselves, but the forces that shape them. As you continue to wrestle with this paradox, you feel something shift in your own thinking. Perhaps the question isn't just why the chosen are given trials, but how they can rise from them. What does it mean to truly endure, to find meaning in the darkest moments? And perhaps, more importantly, what does it mean for you? What part of your own trials are waiting for you to rise above them? As the storms of life rage on, it's easy to overlook the silent forces that drive our behavior and shape our understanding of hardship. The trials we face, especially those bestowed upon the chosen ones, are not isolated events. They are part of a larger, unseen structure that influences how we interpret the world, our suffering, and our very purpose in life. These trials do not just shape individuals, they ripple through societies, cultures, and minds, altering the very fabric of reality itself. To truly understand why the chosen endure such profound trials, we must first look at the consequences, those invisible, often unnoticed effects that these experiences have, not only on the individual but on the collective psyche as well. Consider, for a moment, how we view suffering in general. In the modern world, we have become conditioned to think of suffering as something that must be avoided, something to be eradicated at all costs. We have the technology, the medicine, the resources to minimize pain and discomfort, to prolong life, and to maintain comfort. Yet, despite all these advancements, suffering remains an inevitable part of the human condition. In fact, it seems that in our efforts to eliminate suffering, we have inadvertently increased its psychological grip on us. Our deep resistance to suffering, coupled with the desire to avoid hardship, creates a paradox. We tend to view trials as punishments, something to be avoided or solved. We fail to recognize that, for those who are chosen for great trials, there is a hidden purpose behind this suffering, one that is not only personal but is connected to a larger, collective evolution of the human spirit. The chosen ones are not just being tested for their own growth, they are undergoing an evolution that has the potential to reshape society, to redefine what it means to be human, and to bring insight into areas of life that most would rather not confront. This is where the unseen consequences begin to take shape. Psychological research tells us that trauma, while deeply painful, often leads to profound growth. The concept of post-traumatic growth, PTG, suggests that, after experiencing extreme hardship or suffering, individuals are capable of developing new strengths, new perspectives, and new understandings of themselves and the world. What if the trials faced by the chosen ones are a form of this growth, not just for the individuals involved, but for humanity as a whole. When a person is forced to confront their darkest moments, when they are faced with suffering that pushes them to their limits, they often emerge with new wisdom, a deeper sense of empathy, and a richer understanding of the complexity of life. This transformation is not always visible in the moment. The weight of the struggle often clouds one's ability to recognize the potential for growth. But over time, those who endure hardship begin to see that their suffering has allowed them to perceive the world in a way others cannot. It's as if they have been granted access to a higher truth, a perspective that enables them to see beyond the veil of ordinary existence. This is where the chosen ones often become conduits for change. Their suffering becomes a vessel for transformation, not just for themselves, but for the world around them. In this sense, the consequences of their trials are not always immediately visible. But they are there, shaping their interactions, their beliefs, and their relationships. They become, whether they realize it or not, the touchstones for others, the individuals who, through their endurance, give others hope, meaning, and a path forward. On a societal level, this process is even more profound. Cultures that are willing to confront their darkest elements, their traumas, their collective wounds, can transform in ways that are unimaginable to those who avoid or ignore suffering. History is replete with examples of individuals who endured unspeakable hardships only to rise and lead others to new ways of thinking. Consider figures like Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, or even Viktor Frankl himself. These individuals were not born into lives of ease. They endured unimaginable suffering, yet through that suffering, they were able to offer humanity something greater than what they received: wisdom, compassion, and a renewed sense of what is possible for the human spirit. This societal transformation is not always linear. It is not always clear who will rise from suffering and who will be consumed by it. But the invisible power of suffering shapes societies in profound ways. The chosen ones are often the ones who bring about these shifts, even if they do not fully understand the larger scope of their role. They may feel isolated, rejected, and overwhelmed by the trials they face, yet their endurance becomes a beacon for others. Their strength is woven into the very fabric of human history, and as others look to them, they find the courage to endure their own trials. Moreover, the unseen consequences extend into the neurological and cognitive realms. Research in neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to adapt and change, shows that individuals who experience profound hardship often develop new cognitive patterns. They learn to process emotions in new ways, to think more deeply, and to adapt to the world in ways that others cannot. For the chosen ones, this rewiring is often a necessary response to the immense challenges they face. The trials they endure force them to reconfigure their brains, building neural pathways that allow them to cope with hardship, find meaning in suffering, and emerge stronger. This phenomenon is more than just a psychological response, it is a biological one. When we experience extreme stress, our bodies go into fight or flight mode. Over time, however, this response can change. Instead of being overwhelmed by stress, those who endure prolonged trials develop more effective coping mechanisms. Their resilience becomes physiological, their response to hardship evolving into something not just psychological, but also biological. But the hidden consequences go even deeper. What about the way suffering reshapes identity? For many of the chosen, their trials become so intertwined with their sense of self that the distinction between who they are and what they endure begins to blur. Suffering becomes a defining characteristic, a core element of their identity. This, in itself, is a profound consequence. The chosen ones are not simply enduring trials, they are becoming something new. And this transformation can be both liberating and terrifying. Their identity shifts in ways they cannot always predict or control, and as they emerge from the depths of their struggles, they must contend with a new sense of self. Perhaps this is the ultimate unseen consequence. The trial does not simply change the individual or society, it changes the very nature of who they are. The pain becomes a necessary catalyst for self-transformation, forcing those who endure it to confront and redefine their very existence. And as they do so, they create ripples that echo across time, altering the way we all perceive suffering, strength, and the human experience. As you reflect on this, the weight of it all begins to settle in. The chosen ones are not just enduring for themselves. They are shaping the future. Their trials are not random acts of cosmic cruelty, but necessary steps in the evolution of the human spirit. What began as a paradox, a question of why they suffer, now reveals a deeper truth. It is not about the suffering itself, but the transformative potential it holds. In light of this revelation, the question shifts once again: how can we, as individuals, use our own suffering, not as something to be feared, but as something to be understood and transcended? How can we, too, find meaning in our struggles, and through that meaning, contribute to the larger story of human evolution? The answer, perhaps, lies in how we choose to face the storm. Amidst the suffocating weight of suffering, a whisper begins to stir within you. It is faint at first, barely perceptible over the roar of your thoughts, but gradually, it grows louder, more insistent. What if this suffering, the trials, the burden, the relentless struggle, isn't something you're simply meant to endure passively? What if there is a deeper, hidden opportunity in this chaos, something that can not only free you, but transform you in ways you never thought possible? This is where the rebellion begins. It's not a rebellion against the world, against fate, or even against suffering itself. No, this is a rebellion against the very mindset that tells you that suffering is simply to be borne, endured, or avoided. It's a rebellion against the idea that your trials define you, that they have the final say over your fate. Instead, it is a rebellion of perspective, a radical shift that allows you to see the world, and your place in it, through entirely new eyes. You see, the chosen ones have often been made to feel as though they are victims of some cosmic injustice, that their suffering exists as a test or a punishment. But what if their suffering, your suffering, is not the end, but the beginning of something greater? The key to breaking free lies not in resisting the pain, not in denying it, but in understanding that you hold the power to transform it into something beyond what it was meant to be. This is the essence of the rebellion, the realization that suffering is not a passive force that simply happens to you. It is an active, transformative process that can be shaped and redefined through your response to it. The chosen ones are not passive recipients of divine trials, they are active participants in their own evolution. And in this participation, they reclaim the power to change their circumstances, to shift the very narrative of their lives. Consider the great minds throughout history who've embodied this radical shift in perspective. Viktor Frankl, whose work on logotherapy revolutionized psychology, was a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps. Yet, rather than allowing the suffering he endured to define him, he chose to redefine it. He found meaning in the midst of unimaginable horror, understanding that the ultimate freedom lay in the ability to choose one's response to suffering. Frankl's breakthrough wasn't just psychological, it was spiritual and existential. He understood that while he could not control his circumstances, he could control the meaning he attributed to them. This is where the rebellion begins, in the conscious choice to transcend victimhood. When you stop seeing yourself as the passive recipient of trials and instead recognize your power to shape your response to them, you become a creator of your own fate. This doesn't mean denying the pain. It doesn't mean pretending the struggle is easy or that it doesn't hurt. But it does mean recognizing that you are not bound by the suffering itself. You are free to choose how you move through it. And in that choice lies the key to transformation. Breaking free from the chains of suffering requires a shift from the victim mentality to one of empowerment. It requires an acknowledgement that trials, however painful, are not external punishments, but invitations to rise, to expand into something more. This shift begins with a simple, yet profound, realization: you are not your pain. This is where many people go wrong. They identify so strongly with their suffering that they allow it to become their identity. They say, "I am broken, I am weak, I am nothing without my pain." But this is a lie. You are not your trials. You are not your suffering. These are not the core of who you are, they are just experiences you are moving through. And if you choose to, you can move through them with purpose and strength. Think of the countless individuals throughout history who have faced unimaginable suffering and risen above it. Take, for instance, Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison for his fight against apartheid. Was he defined by his years of imprisonment, by the hardship and torment he endured? No. What defined him was his response to that suffering. He chose not to let bitterness or anger consume him, but instead, he emerged from his ordeal with a commitment to healing, reconciliation, and transformation. His suffering was not in vain, it was the crucible in which his character was forged, and through his suffering, he became a beacon of hope for millions. Mandela's story isn't unique. There are countless examples of people who, like him, faced the most extreme adversity and emerged from it not broken, but stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to the world. This is the power of the rebellion, the understanding that suffering, in its most intense form, has the potential to push you beyond the boundaries of your former self and into a new realm of possibility. So how can you break free? How can you, too, transform the trials of your life into something that shapes you rather than breaks you? The first step is to acknowledge the truth: you are not in control of your circumstances, but you are in control of your reaction to them. The storms may rage, the trials may come, but they do not own you. You own the way you face them. This is not an easy path, and it requires an inner strength that many may not even realize they possess. It requires courage to face the unknown, to dive into the depths of your own pain and emerge with something new. But it is in this very process of transformation that you reclaim your power. The second step is to embrace the idea that suffering can be a source of meaning and growth. Rather than seeing your hardships as an obstacle to overcome, see them as a gateway, a doorway to your deeper self. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What can this suffering teach me about who I am and what I'm capable of? When you view suffering in this way, it becomes less a burden and more a catalyst for evolution. In the end, the rebellion is not about fighting the world or the forces that shape it. It's about reclaiming your own narrative, about seeing yourself not as a victim of circumstances, but as a creator of your own destiny. The trials of the chosen ones, the suffering they endure, are not something they have to accept passively. They are invitations to evolve, to rise, and to transcend. This radical shift in perspective doesn't promise that life will suddenly become easier. But it does promise that, through this rebellion, you will become something greater than you ever imagined. You will find meaning in the pain, purpose in the struggle, and strength in the very trials that once seemed insurmountable. And when you break free, when you rise above the storm, you will discover that the true power lies not in avoiding suffering, but in transforming it, transcending it, and becoming the person you were always meant to be. In the quiet aftermath of the rebellion, you stand at the precipice of something profound. The storm has passed, but its echoes reverberate through your being. There's a deep, quiet knowing within you now, something that, while hard to articulate, resonates with the very core of your existence. You have moved through suffering, you have broken free from the chains of your trials, and now, in the stillness, you confront the ultimate truth: everything you've endured, every ounce of pain, every hardship, was never the end of your journey. It was merely the beginning. This realization is not something you come to easily, nor is it something that can be understood simply by reading a book or hearing a lecture. It is a truth that can only be grasped through experience, through lived suffering and transcendence. And when you understand it, when it truly sinks in, it changes everything. The way you see yourself, the way you see the world, the way you see your purpose. The ultimate truth is this: suffering, pain, and trials are not the enemy. They are the very mechanism through which your soul is forged, shaped, and refined. Without them, there would be no depth, no transformation, no possibility for growth. The trials you face are not obstacles, they are essential to your evolution. This may sound paradoxical, even cruel at first, but once you grasp this truth, you see the world differently. The very nature of human existence is suffering, not because life is inherently cruel, but because suffering is the crucible in which meaning is created. It is in the deepest moments of despair, in the darkest night of the soul, that we find the greatest potential for growth. The chosen ones are not simply the ones who suffer the most, they are the ones who have been given the opportunity to transmute that suffering into something greater, something that transcends the individual and touches the collective. Consider the concept of alchemy, an ancient practice in which base metals were believed to be transformed into gold. This is the perfect metaphor for the journey of the chosen. The suffering you face, the trials you endure, are like base metals, raw, unrefined, and seemingly worthless. But through the fire of suffering, through the heat of your trials, something extraordinary happens. You are transformed. Your soul, your spirit, your very identity is refined, purified, and elevated. And in this process, you are no longer just yourself, you become something greater, something that can carry the weight of the world and stand as a beacon of hope for others. The ultimate truth is that you are not defined by your suffering, but by your ability to transcend it. What you endure doesn't shape you in the way that the world may want you to believe. It does not diminish you or mark you as broken. In fact, it is through these trials that you become more than you were before. You become more compassionate, more resilient, more aware of the deeper truths of existence. You become someone who knows, not just intellectually but on a soul-deep level, that suffering is not something to fear or avoid, but something to understand and embrace. It is through this embrace that you transcend it. This truth, difficult as it may be to accept, liberates you. It frees you from the shackles of victimhood, from the endless cycle of pain and suffering that most of the world resigns themselves to. You begin to see your struggles not as punishments but as gifts. Gifts that hold within them the seeds of transformation, growth, and wisdom. Every hardship you face, every trial that comes your way, becomes an opportunity to refine yourself, to dig deeper into the well of your own being, and to emerge from the darkness with a new sense of purpose. But there is an even deeper realization here, one that will shift the way you view not just your own suffering, but the suffering of others. Once you understand that suffering is a necessary force for growth, you begin to see that the chosen ones are not isolated figures meant to carry their burden alone. No, they are the ones who pave the way for others, who show that there is a path through the darkness. When you rise from your trials, when you transcend them, you not only transform yourself, but offer a blueprint for others to follow. You become a living example of what it means to rise above suffering, to find meaning in the chaos, and to emerge stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. In this way, the ultimate truth reveals the interconnectedness of all things. Your suffering is not just yours, it is part of the collective struggle of humanity. The trials of the chosen ones ripple outwards, touching everyone, and through their example, others find the strength to face their own struggles. This is the beauty of the human experience, that we are all connected, that our pain and our growth are shared, and that in each other's suffering, we find the strength to endure. The final realization, the most powerful truth, is that the suffering we experience is not the end of our story, it is the beginning of something far more profound. It is through suffering that we are given the opportunity to become who we were always meant to be. And in that becoming, we unlock the greatest potential for transformation, not just within ourselves, but within the world around us. As you stand on the precipice of this final realization, you see the world with new eyes. The trials, the darkness, the pain, they are no longer obstacles to overcome, but vital experiences through which your soul can grow, evolve, and transcend. The chosen ones are not defined by their suffering, but by their capacity to embrace it and transform it into something greater. And in that transformation, you find your true purpose, not to avoid suffering, not to escape it, but to transcend it and become the person you were always meant to be. You are no longer just a person enduring trials, you are a force of transformation, a living testament to the power of suffering, and a beacon of light for all those who walk the path behind you. The storm has passed, and now, in the quiet aftermath, you are reborn.